Hey you guys, I'm very excited for this video. We are painting with children's watercolors. On the shop description they're called something like Hoka watercolors, but on the packaging it really just says aquarelle and watercolor blocks. I really can't wait to paint with these. I've never painted with paints like these before. As a kid I was never really interested in painting with watercolors, and my very first set was the Sakura Koi, which I got around 2 years ago. So there will be more information and the link to the shop on the description below. So right off the bat, the color options look to be pretty decent. There's a red, a yellow, and a blue, but the blue I don't think looks too promising. A very light blue, so it doesn't really look like a primary blue that you can mix in with other primaries to get different colors. There's a white, which I don't normally use, but I think the black is needed for sets like these. So we're moving on to the swatches. The first one, the pink, went exactly as I expected. There wasn't a lot of pigment that went into the brush. It's really hard to lift some of the colors onto the brush with this set. It's like taking a wet brush into a dried clay, which is the best way I can describe it. The oranges and the yellows performed much better. Even the red held its own, and the green also became one of my favorites in this set. Those colors are very nice and vibrant, which is something I'm pretty excited about. These are already colors you need as a good foundation for portraits. You have your warm yellows in there, and ideally you'd want a good solid blue, but there's a green that works just fine, and the red looks to be on the cooler side, which works out in the end for portraits. And then the black is a nice addition to the set, which I wouldn't normally say, but there aren't a lot of darker colors in this set, so it's just nice to have. I was initially gonna paint on a different sketch for this one because I just like this one so much. It's Timothy Chalamet. I hope I'm pronouncing it right, and I didn't want to ruin this sketch with underwhelming paints, but I've tried them out and I like them so much that I'm just gonna go ahead and paint on it. I am gonna be using my pencil number 12 brush along with my favorite artist's loft brushes this time. I really love these brushes. They need more love in the art community. Wish I could buy them again, but I haven't been able to find them here. So if you guys know where I could get them, please let me know. Today, to really try these paints out, we are gonna paint on about the opposite ends of watercolor paper spectrum. First, we're painting on my Fabriano Artistico paper. It's 100% cotton and 300 GSM, and the brand is a tiny bit on the more expensive side. You'll find brands that costs a little bit more than this. That is just leaning on the pricey side when it comes to watercolor papers. After we do the painting on that one, we are also gonna move on to a more practical non-watercolor paper, which would fit more for the price range of these paints, especially when you're just starting out. Realistically, these are the paper that you're more likely to use. The very first painting, I'm going to be doing exactly how I would normally use my other paints. So I'm going to be using the same techniques that I normally do, which is I do a nice little gradient to start off. This is how I figure out a color palette that would work for that piece. And then again, I'm very surprised about these colors, especially the orange. I really love how it looks with the green. I think they bleed into each other really nicely. These paints don't spread out too much after they're laid out even on white paper. I'm used to this because that's exactly how my Mugello paints work. As you use more watercolors, you'll start to see that different paints will behave differently. It's not really a price thing, it's just that different colors have different personalities to them, and you really just need to get to know them very well. So yeah, these paints are on the predictable side. They mostly just stay where you put them, like my Mugello, as I've mentioned before. And after these initial layer dries, there's not a lot of difference in colors, so I really like that they didn't dull out at all. Well, at least not noticeably. I didn't notice it so much. One glaring negative side to these colors is that this color palette is very limiting. That blue is as bad as I expected it would be for mixing. It left a white cast on the paints, really only works when mixed with the black, and even then it hardly ever made a difference, so it's very hard to work with that blue. But these colors really layer very well. They're transparent. Any paints that you lay down before them, no matter how watered down they are, would still show up when they're dry after you add a lot of layers on top, which is awesome. I am in love with this green and the warm black together for the hair. It's very hard to achieve very dark colors, which is something I expected going on, but I'm still surprised at how well these worked. I mean, seriously, I even like them more than some of my expensive paints. Which, this will sound very controversial, but I prefer these paints more than my Cotman set. That set was just not as vibrant as I expected it to be, and I think they're very messy paints. I don't think they dry that well on the palette, I mean. But these are very personal preferences. I suspect that this is gonna be a very unpopular opinion, and that's fine. I mean, those paints will probably age better than these ones, way better. And it's very difficult to lift these colors from their pans, and the color options are limiting, to say the least. But some of these colors are more enjoyable than other paints I've tried. Just for the price I paid for them, I just really didn't expect to enjoy working with these so much. So I'm just gonna finish this first painting off with my Tombow brush pen. I love these brush pens. I buy them often, and I think these will work well to complement the colors that I laid down and really darken those lines to make them pop, especially the hair, where it wasn't really that easy to achieve such dark colors. I think that the paints really needed those lines. So for my next try, I'm gonna be painting on my sketchbook. This is non-watercolor paper. It's 120 GSM. This paper I think you're more likely to buy if you're gonna be using these paints, so I just wanted to try those out on this. But then I would really like to say that I wouldn't ever recommend painting on non-watercolor paper as your first try. You want to use watercolor paper. These are completely different papers. You're likely to get discouraged by your paints when you're painting with this, when it's really just your paper work that's working against you. But if your budget only allows that, when you're a beginner, it's really hard to justify investing on expensive art materials. I would just like to let you know that this is an option that's also doable. This is just a really quick sketch I did from Pinterest. I don't know if you guys have seen my sketchbook tours. I do a lot of these where I add splashes of watercolors to my sketches to really just add color to them. So this is a style that I do often. This is not just for this video. As usual, I sketched it with my red pen because that's what I would normally use. So for these, you really want to keep the water very little. You just want to have enough to lift the color from the pan. You don't want to add too much water or you'll just rip right through your paper. You also want to use single strokes. You don't want to add too much stress to it as well. I really like mixing colors. It makes it look more in-depth when really just this style would only require single layers. I make sure I'm painting on clothes that are supposed to be white. I think it helps really enhance those shadows. What I don't like is the skirt on the blue, which is very hard to work with, but I really like the sweater on the left because I use the colors that are very vibrant on the set, the green and the orange. And then I just make sure to add some dark accents to these. These are really what make the lighter strokes stand out. And then for the inking, which is the more important part of this style, I used my G-Tech pen because I love pairing these with my watercolor sketches because these are nice and opaque and I think they complement each other very well. In the end, I just added some brush pen work on top for some really dark edges, but you can definitely use pens with these. In fact, I kind of wish I did now. I think those lines would have given these sketches more personality. So, in conclusion, these paints really surprised me. They are way better than I originally thought they were. Would I recommend them for beginners? Yes. I'd try to experiment with them like any other paints. I mean, you really want to get to know them first before you go all out and paint with them. Would I recommend them with non-watercolor paper? No. With watercolors, you really want to use the right paper for them to really use them to their best potential. And if you're a beginner, you want to use at least some entry-level watercolor paper like the Canson XL, which is something that I also use, and it's great. I just use non-watercolor paper for you guys if it's really the only option for you, but it does require a lot of patience and practice to achieve. So yeah, that is it for the video. It was really fun for me. I hope you guys liked it. Thank you guys for watching and happy holidays.